Hello, I'm Tom Parker and welcome to Voices from the CEPS Ideas Lab. In this episode, I spoke with Artur Bogucki. Artur is an associate researcher in the Global Governance, Regulation, Innovation and Digital Economy Unit at CEPS. He is a specialist in behavioural law and economics, evidence-based regulation and public and international law analysis. During our interview, we discussed liability in the age of AI, focusing on some of the challenges this new digital technology brings and where responsibility lies when AI systems cause harm. I hope you enjoy the episode. Well, Artur, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me. Lovely.
I'm going to get stuck into the challenges of the particular topic we're about to tackle. What are the biggest challenges in defining responsibility when AI systems cause harm?
Thank you, Tom, for the answer. I think that's spot on and think we need to cover right now super quickly because it turns out that when we try to apply the good old rules of traditional liability to digital technologies and AI specifically, we have some really particular problems we need to address which didn't come up before. So the main three issues, I would say, are the opacity, so the black box, the self-learning of the system, and the subsequent inability to look inside them and to determine what happened, which caused all sorts of problems. Yeah. So I would say that the first one, the inability to look inside, the black boxy nature, mean that the people who were harmed, who are victims of the systems, cannot really prove, first of all, who's responsible, because there are multiple entities involved in the life cycle of the model or the system. That's the first thing. The other one would be they do not know what to even look for sometimes to pinpoint the blame. Like, for example, is the model or the system responsible for diagnosing me? For example, is it defective? And how do I prove if it's defective? Do I point to data? Do I point to a systemic problem? Do I point to a life cycle problem within it? How do I determine that the decision support system actually did something wrong? So the lack of knowledge is the huge problem. And then finally, the lack of insight. Because even if you heavily suspect that the decision support system diagnosed you wrongly, then how do you pinpoint and gather the data, basically your evidence, to claim and to construct a case against the system provider or the system constructor or whoever, right? So you do not have access to either the system itself or to data itself. So that would be the problems that we are facing right now.
It's sort of like being a victim of crime and then you go to a police lineup and there's just no one standing and it's a blank wall.
Yeah,
and you're asked to describe your attacker and what's happened, and you can't. There's no information. You can't see what's happened, and so therefore, how do you ascertain blame? How, therefore, is the EU approaching liability in the age of AI? How are you going to sort out those problems?
Oh yes, well, EU is trying the best. Is trying for a couple of years now. Regarding AI liability or AI as a whole. EU was trying to construct a legal system around AI, and rightly so, I think. So we need to distinguish between the safety regulation, which is mostly prescriptive, which would be your AI Act, now enforced and being applicable onwards, and the liability part. So an ex ante the prescriptive part and the ex post, so the liability. The prescriptive part, the AI Act, would be, okay, this is what you need to do in order to be actually in line with what we would like AI systems to be. And then liability part is the ex post. So who's responsible if the things which we want in the first place to happen actually materialize?
Yeah.
They could be the same entities, but not necessarily. And so in the liability portion, the ex post portion of the EU regulation of AI, we have two proposals. Well, the first one is the Product Liability Directive, a renewed version, which is now in force and will be applicable from the fall of 2026 onwards. And that's the EU level of liability regulation. And then we used to have, until very recently, AI Liability Directive proposal, which aim was to harmonize the primarily national liability regimes into one place and sort of bring them up to speed when it comes to AI challenges that we just mentioned. So how those two were supposed to tackle that and AI Act in combination as a system is that PLD, Product Liability Directive, brought up three new ideas. So first of all, we treat AI as a software. So we actually can apply product liability rules now to AI. Huge step, because one of the questions is AI a software? What is it? So we now know AI is a software. Second of which is what do we do exactly with people not being able to prove what was going on? So the reversal of the burden of proof is now in the product liability directive. So now, if something happens, we can reverse the burden of proof, and now it's the companies, the AI companies, that have to prove there was no defect and that they did everything right. So the presumption they did everything right in order to prevent what happened. So it's not up to, well, not in each case, but it would not be up to the victims to prove that that something happened, but actually to prove innocence. I know it's controversial, but it is probably the only way to actually tackle it.
100%.
And then the third crucial aspect of the Product Liability Directive is that court judges actually can make AI companies to share the data, the insights, and the information on the models, on the systems, on the data sets with the victims, so they can build the case if there is a reasonable degree of probability that the system was responsible for the harm, which is huge. And that's why I would like to point out that probably actually PLD, which was constantly in the shadow of the AI Act, actually could be way more impactful for the AI businesses because of this one rule that you need to actually provide, of course, with respect to IP rights and so on and so forth, provide the information to the victim could be more impactful than the prescriptive AI Act. So I think businesses should really watch out for the PLD and actually gather all the data and all the information to be able to actually comply with it, than to watch out for the AI Act, which is now way of being fully in force. And it is because the Product Liability Directive actually applies to all the systems, not only to the high risk and general purpose as if the AI Act. And the late AI Liability Directive, in contrast, was supposed to do something different, because Product Liability Directive does not apply to everything. It applies to physical and psychological harm. And it applies to corruption of data sets. But if we would, for example, if we were chatting or someone else would be chatting with one of the prominent chatbots, and the chatbot claimed that I am involved in some huge conspiracy to throw over the government, for example, this is not covered by the Product Liability Directive. This would have been covered by the AI Liability Directive. What if, for example, we connect a chatbot to a conference and ask it questions, and the output would be just a set of racial slurs, for example, so
Yes.
discrimination. That's also not covered by the Product Liability Directive. What if we discover that prominent chatbots were trained on data which wasn't freely available, or the output of the model actually infringe of the IP of other entities? That's also not covered by the PLD and would have been covered by the AI Liability Directive. So this is what we gain, and this is what we lost.
Yeah.
So we need to now think about what shall we do? Because the three aspects that I just mentioned, so our personal rights, the discrimination, and the IP problem remains not unsolved, because it is sort of regulated on a national level, but it just became so much more difficult to enforce from both businesses and from the victims, because what you need to do is basically tackle the 27 liability regimes for all of those issues. So we lost the harmonization on the national level, which seems like a problem for actually innovation, because it creates a whole lot of costs to deal with it.
And also the PLD, as you said, is going to be coming in late 2026.
Yeah.
And we already know that the AI landscape is rapidly evolving. And how do you deal with the fact that there's a gap between that coming into play and today, and the fact that you're losing certain things from the AI Liability Directive, as you've said? What's the state of affairs, and how do you deal with liability when it's a fast evolving landscape?
As the reaction of regulation to technology landscape is always a problem. Law is always behind by nature, and I would like to start with that. Establish
Well, it
that.
has to be reactive by nature.
It has to be
mostly.
reactive, exactly, by nature. So this is not necessarily the issue, but what we need in order to sort of catch up is to establish the system as fast as possible and letting it grow with the advancements. So there are two different behavioral reactions, I think, between the prescriptive nature of the ex-ante AI Act and ex post liability. Because if you regulate AI in two different ways, you get different reactions. As I've mentioned, you either comply with all of it, and if not, all the agency will go after you, or you leave the market to it, allow them to do their best, and if only they commit some harm to entities, then you go after, because then they can get sued,
Yeah.
which is a completely different dynamic. That's why I think we need the AI liability system to complement the prescriptiveness of the AI Act, to close the legal system of AI in EU as soon as possible, and actually letting it grow, because we need legal doctrine on it. It's the first time we are doing this thing, so we need the doctrine to develop. We need judges to adjudicate on certain cases, because we need to know what certain definitions mean. What are they even exactly?
Yeah.
What are the precedents? What I already mentioned it. What is a defect in the context of AI? We need adjudication on it, and as soon as we have the liability system in place, then we actually can move forward with it. And we really need that to complement the AI Act, because in the current light, in the light of the reports on competitiveness of how EU should go forward, how we should actually get growth going and innovation moving. We know that the AI Act is going to be changed at the end of this year and sort of slimmed down, as they say. I think we can't do that without closing the AI liability gap, because you can't strip down things from the prescriptive ex ante without having the ex post in place. It should have been the other way around. So cutting red tape, as they call it, whatever that means, is not to cut the AI Liability Directive, because that actually allows the market to do the innovation, the growth, whatever they need to do. And then if they do something wrong, then they can get sued. Then you actually need to probably cut down on the AI Act if you would like to set them a bit more free, right? So my pitch would be, get this AI liability system down in place if you would like to boost innovation, not the other way around.
Well, fingers crossed that happens, Artur. And it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. Look forward to hearing more about this extremely important space. So thanks for your time.
Lovely talking to you. Thank you.
Cheers. Bye-bye.